My name is Dan Pelton. I am the author of Rethinking Resilience, Employee Resilience, which you see here, as well on the screen. You can pass it around and you can take a look as I'm speaking. I have the distinct pleasure of speaking at the 1:30 p.m. slot. Did you know, according to research, there's something called the post-lunch circadian drop, and that is at the 1:30 p.m. time. So I have a little bit of a steep hill to climb. The good news is that according to TED Talk research, which I think a lot about, 18 minutes is the ideal time to speak to have people to pay attention. So we have some conflicting things working against us, but my hope is as a team we can rally together and make it through this next 18 minutes together. I am Dan Pelton, like I mentioned, clinical psychologist. I former military, and that was really the genesis behind this book. I was a military psychologist in Afghanistan. And there I was the psychologist for about 10,000 soldiers. So I had a huge responsibility. And what I found is that mental health as is, sort of from a clinical perspective, wasn't working. I was flooded by thousands. I just could not keep up. So I started thinking about upstream drivers of mental health. I started to think of resilience. What was it that brought people into my tent, I guess we would call it, it wasn't an office, versus people who didn't? So I went to a lot of the units where the guys I was seeing at therapy, I went to their commander and just tried to pulse the ground and see what's going on. And what I recognized is he was overwhelmed. He didn't have a good support system. He didn't have people to talk to. He was really struggling. And that had a trickle-down effect on the base of soldiers. Vice versa, I spoke to healthy units, healthy leaders, and they had people who rarely ever saw me. So in many ways, there was something happening upstream that was a preventative factor for resilience. And I found that to be interesting. The past 13 years, I've been working in government consulting. Those are like the last two words you ever want. I work in the government and I work in consulting. It's like, what on earth do you? A lot of my friends still don't really know what I do. But what I do is I help organizations with things like this, creating cultures that are sustainable, that are unique, that engage, that align with employee health and employee welfare. So I'm really glad to be here. This is the beginning of my book. I find this to be a pretty sort of a compelling quote. And if I had to, I'll probably say thesis 3 times, but this is one thesis. It's the idea of challenging knowledge, challenging what it is that we think we know. You know, in corporate wellness, there's this widespread belief that if you offer a smattering of wellness resources, a yoga class here, a nap pod here, a ping pong table here, that somehow is going to create an inequitable workload. That's going to solve inequity in the workload. It just doesn't happen. It's nice. It's great that we offer these perks, but they're doing more harm than good. And that's partially what I'm going to talk about today and describe in my book. And that's the illusion that I want to talk about. It creates a sense of psychological comfort for leadership. I have this class. I feel good. If I didn't have this mic, I'd go like this. My hands are clean, right? So real resilience, workforce resilience, it requires going deeper than wellness perks. So this book goes under the surface. It looks deeper. It challenges how we think. I'll challenge how you think in just a minute, but it challenges why is it the way that we think we do, especially around things in the mental health field. And that's what my next 15-ish minutes are about, is challenging the illusion that resilience has already been taken care of. Okay, Peter Thiel's a contrarian. Many of you may or may not like him. I don't even know if you know him, but he's a venture capitalist, PayPal, Palantir, Facebook. So he wrote a really interesting book called 0 to 1. It's contrarian at the core, but it's the idea of how do we stop going one to N? How do we stop copying what's happening in the wellness industry? Sorry, I don't mean to decry the wellness industry too much, but how do we keep retreading the same things and we're not actually solving the problem we're setting out to solve? So his idea is, how do I challenge new employees? This is the question he asks people interviewing for him. Imagine you sitting down and you're ready with your PowerPoint, you're ready with your brand statement, you're ready with your 3 lines of this is what I do. And this is the question that he asks. How on earth would he answer that question? He says that courage is more rare than genius. So he sees good answers, but he sees courage very rarely. And it's the courage to stand out, not to be a contrarian for the sake of contrarianism, but to stand out, being able to back up what it is that you say and having a compelling viewpoint. I've thought about this question for years. I would encourage you just to sit and think about this question. I have a list of probably 10 or 20 things that I have written down. But in the field of mental health, what is it? What important truth about mental health do very few people agree with you on? Let's take some, we're not going to do it now, but take some time to think about that question, because this, let me tell you, this is where innovation happens, when we start to pull behind the curtain and think, what does going against the flow look like? So I'm going to present to you a couple of pictures, and I'm curious how you'll react here. Now, these are headlines. These are real headlines. And I pulled these. In fact, the one from the Wall Street Journal was probably a year ago. I was reading, this just came up. And I'm curious what your reaction would be, right? If you see something like that headline. Mine is like, asylums. Well, that's crazy. Like, asylums are bad. Historically, they've not been good for people. They're overrun, bad, inhumane kind of treatment. And so my initial reaction to that is a sense of discomfort, of fear, of maybe disgust. Like, that is crazy. And then I read the article, and it's interesting. It sort of educates me on what asylums were. I'm not saying I'm convinced, but part of it was upending some of our orthodox thinking, which I'm not sure we do a lot. How many of you have therapists in here or have some sort of okay, 1, 2, okay. Does the second one, maybe it doesn't, it does for me. Will AI replace therapists? Does that elicit anything in you? Angst? Maybe some people are like, that's awesome, that's perfect. For me, I get a little worried. It's like, is this going to have good fidelity, good ethics? Is my job in jeopardy? What on earth am I going to do if I can't do this? So these kind of things elicit, but what that does is make me explore AI. Well, what is AI? Like, what is the possibility? What are the good things about it? What stance can I take if needed? Our friend / enemy, however you want to go on that one, Elon Musk and Neuralink, that usually provokes a lot of things in people. Like, oh my goodness, that is crazy. How is that going to happen? And that's okay. All of these things I'm not advocating for necessarily, but part of it is, why is it that I have this issue, this reaction, this fear, or whatever that may be? So what the core of the first part of my book, I said thesis, is does innovation feel threatening to us in our field of mental health? And the answer may be no, and that's fine. So what I did, okay. So I was writing a book, and I was on burnout, and I said, and I had people like, can you send me any kind of articles that you see, or maybe like kind of weird or crazy or strange things? And here's what I got. So these are all real. The millennium burnout fad, it's such a fad, millennium, they just need to get over that. The 4 surprising, but it's actually good for you. So it turns out, so that's good. Self-care, that's great. I mean, you can just self-care your way out of burnout, but I'll say, I'm going to argue that's antithetical, because burnout actually is not a self issue. It's a workplace issue. By definition, by the World Health Organization, it is a work-related stress, related to work-related stress. So in the definition, it is, and I'll argue this in a minute, it's not your fault, it's your boss's fault. And lastly, 4 steps to beating burnout. I intentionally didn't include any names of published, I'm just kidding. I included HBR. I mean, even big name articles are putting their names out there like that. And again, this stuff is fine, but there's implicit message baked in here. And I mentioned this book, this idea of sensationalized hyperbolic language, self-referentials, much of it is self-referential. And I'm going to break down that idea. So here is, so part of my book was to answer that question from Peter Thiel. So what are things that maybe I don't agree on? What's the evidence for it? And I spend the first half of the book with 3 somewhat contrarian ideas. You may not think they're totally crazy, but here they are. Here are my 3 ideas. You'll see on the left-hand side, burnout isn't all that serious, is one. Where on earth do I come up? How did I figure that out? Well, let's go back to Exhibit A. So burnout is not all that serious. I argue pretty strongly, I think, stress from burnout, it can kill you. Sorry, I didn't mean to share that with you, everybody. I hope I prepared you, but it can kill you. There are studies that show it takes 10 years to recover from burnout. Some studies show you'll never recover. Okay, so we do need to start taking this seriously, and I'm not sure we have. I was talking to an executive recently, and she said to me, aren't we over burnout already? Like, can't we move past this? I said, okay. And I was like, how do we move past this? Like, can't you just do a talk or, okay, what's part of the problem? So then you may experience as well. Leaders come to us, especially psychologists and mental health, do a one-stop shop. I want you to do a 30-minute seminar on how to improve our thinking. But that does not change, again, inequitable workloads, job control, job ambiguity, stressful job events, you name it. So I set out to debunk these myths, and that's what I do in several of these chapters. The burden falls on you, not your organization. I've got lots of data, lots of examples to say that's in fact not true. The attrition data is incredible. If I have time, I will talk about a case study at the end that sort of brings this home. Employee engagement is not the cornerstone for happy. It is. It's not, unfortunately. And the reason is how we operationalize and define this. Burnout and resilience are not the same coin, two different sides. They're different constructs. You, in fact, can be highly engaged and highly burned out, and that's what feeds into how I define resilience. Now, if you are not someone who likes tables, I've got a picture for you. This is our canary. This is our canary in the coal mine. You've probably seen this. I've presented this before. So we have our friend there, actually up until 1985 in West Virginia, I think in other places, they actually used canaries to fly into coal mines, detect if it was toxic, the canary would die, wouldn't come out. Sorry, I don't mean to sound not sympathetic, but they weren't sympathetic. And then the cave was toxic, so we don't go in there. We don't go in the toxic mine, it could kill us. I don't know. There's no relationship with the workplace, so I'll move on here. No, there's a big word. I love this picture as well. We've got this cage. We've got a gas mask. In many ways, we're telling workers, put on your gas mask. Let's go to work. You'll get through the day, and then we can come out and we can do what we need to do. So let me break this. I'll break down those three orthodoxies in three different ways. So burnout isn't all that serious. We're equipping the workforce with individual cages, PTO, mindfulness, stress 101. This temporary relief, but doesn't provide a solution to a toxic environment. I've had many people, and you may have as well, good-willing, good-intentioned people who say to an employee, man, it's been crazy here. Take a week off, take PTO, get refreshed, come back. The employee, okay, it's good for 1 or 2 days, but then the same system is broken. I think I'm alluding, I hope so, foreshadowing what I'm getting to. I'm not just complaining. The book is all about how do we fix this from a systems level. But let me get to the second piece. This is your problem. This is that myth of well-intentioned, take PTO. I'm putting the burden of responsibility on you. I'm not saying take PTO and here's what I'm going to do to change our workload. It's just one way. So what do you do? What do I do? Is we take that personally. There's something wrong with me. I should be able to do this. I should be able to handle this. But it's very challenging. There's a direct correlation between corporate spending and burnout. I just wrote an article in Fast Company about this. I looked at all the data. It's really interesting, direct correlation. The more we spend, the more burned out people are, right? Well, not really, maybe. But what's happening is the spending is what? Class, not addressing the problem that it should be. It's on third-party perks and other things like that. So this actually is your boss's problem. Finally, engagement is not, or is a burnout solve. Well, that's what we need to mask the wound as an antiseptic to get rid of what's happening in our environment. If she just uses her wings, right? If she's just engaged and is the bird that she should or wants to be, things will be better. The engaged and exhausted don't quit loudly; they just disappear. So I'm gonna actually have 2 more slides. So I will go through this. Maybe I'll take a little bit more time. So here's the problem. Here's where we need to focus our attention, not on our friend the canary, but on what's the environment. And I imagine many of you in here would come in and say, yeah, I totally agree. You don't need to build that case. But I've worked in business, high level, years and years and years, and people don't get it. So the case has to be stated over and over before we jump to solutions. Because if we don't state the case, the solutions are self-help fixes. A little bit of an aside. I have nothing wrong with self-help. I have nothing wrong with mindfulness. I actually do it every day. I love it. But it does not change my job ambiguity. That's not what it was meant to address. So here's how I define workforce resilience in the book. So let me back up. Individual resilience, many times we hear, is the ability to bounce back from hardship, adversity, or catalyzes personal growth. So there's some event or events that causes us to sort of look inside ourselves and understand how we can grow or learn or come out stronger from that. Did you know there's really no definition of workforce resilience out there, which is kind of interesting to me. a lot of times we couple that together and people say it's the ability of the workforce to bounce back from things. And I'll say that's not true. It's the organization's ability to build a culture that sustains engagement while actively minimizing burnout. I'll come back to why that in a minute. That may sound a little strange to you. And protective of well-being. All right, so this is it, my last slide, and I have 4 pieces. The question is, what do we do? What on earth do we do from here? Okay, so there's a study done in 2019 in Yale, and that study looked at burnout, looked at engagement to understand what were the similarities, what were the differences, how might there be overlap, things of that nature. So if I were to ask you, and this is a little bit of a deceptive question, what percent of the workforce is burned out? Many people would say, oh, it's 50%, 60%, 70%. And a lot of data would suggest that's true. But if I want to get very tricky, I could say actually it's 1.8%. Because when we parse out true engagement, right, when it's just burnout and no engagement, it's pretty low. The reality is most of the workforce is engaged. The top 2 bullet points add up to around 95%. So most everyone is engaged. But they call this group the engaged exhausted. So the engaged exhausted is this group. Think about ER, docs, nurses, staff during the pandemic. Were they engaged? Totally engaged. Were they exhausted? Totally. And you know who that group is, that top 54%. These are your top performers, number 1. And number 2, these are the people who are more likely to silently quit, leave the organization with a shadow without anything there. So this is a concerning trend that we see. So a lot of times, like I had mentioned, we use engagement as that Band-Aid. Like if you're just more engaged, you won't be burned out, and that's not true. So going back, I define workforce resilience as our ability to do this, right? The next question would be, well, how on earth do we do that? Well, I have like 2 minutes to share that with you. Maybe 3. I talked about the job demands resources model. As much as I like to riff on contemporary culture and problems that's happening, it's very wedded to empirical research. The JDR model, if you don't know, job demands resources. It asserts that the more demands that you have on your job, the less resources that you have, the more burned out you're going to be. Okay, so it's like a little teeter-totter, another foreshadowing. I'll show you a picture in a minute of one. But this idea of more things that sap your resources at work, these are demands, and less things that give you energy. There's scores of studies and data to support this. So I use this as a basis, but my 12 core demands and resources are a little different. I'll show them in just a minute, but all based on research. So people often ask, what's step 1? Like, what do I do? One thing you can do is look at these demands and resources, sit down with your team and have a conversation about it. I know that sounds super soft, but let me tell you how this will go because I've done it. Okay, workload. This is our team here. We're going to spend the next 5 minutes talking about our workload. All right, let's go around. It's not 5 minutes. It's going to be 3 or 4 hours. That's a huge issue for people. And I say, start there. Just talk about workload distribution. And usually the response is, that's too much work. It's like, okay, well, I understand that. It is a lot of work. But again, if we want to solve this problem, here's where we start. So I sort of foreshadowed this teeter-totter. You'll see this in my book a lot. All right, very quickly. So I'll give you a real-world example. I'm much larger than my 2 little daughters, and they love to go on teeter-totters. And it's not super fun for me, honestly. They'll both go on one side. So I'll be on the right side there on the ground. They'll be on the upside. And I do all the work. It's annoying after a while. It's rough. So they invite their 2 little friends over, and they jump on, and then there's balance. And it's like, okay, this is fun, but it's a lot of work to start adding, some of these and adding some of those. So what's an out-of-the-box thing? So I lumber off this teeter-totter. I get the fulcrum in the middle. I'm super strong, apparently. I move the fulcrum, and suddenly it's closer to me, and we can have a fun time. So what we've done is we've shifted a lever. And I interviewed lots of CEOs, and I profiled lots of companies, Google, GE, Adobe, many. And I found that there are 4 levers that can move culture to create workforce resilience. And the 4 levers are there: performance management, you can see analytics, job crafting, strategic communication. Let me give you a real world example. There's a company called Genpact. I don't know if you've heard of them. Super cool thing that they do. Big technology company. I'll be at my computer. A mood alert will come up. Mood alert. So I get to rate my mood at work today. 1, 5, 3, and it gets smarter. this AI thing. It just gets smarter. So it starts to feed and it starts to feed. Eventually, these mood scores gets rolled up to the CEO, and it impacts the top 150 executives' bonuses. All right. So you want to change culture? You want to do a little bit of this? Can you imagine if my bonus has been cut by 75%? I'm on the floor. I'm asking you about your workload. We need to manage this. Stress, role conflict, rewards. Are we doing enough of that? Enough recognition? I've done these kind of things before with groups, maybe not with 12. And it's interesting because if I had to guess in here, and I said workload, it might not, it probably isn't. There's probably other things. Somebody would be like, I have zero control. That's killing me. I have zero control. So it's just an interesting exercise to do. One more company. It's called Fast Company. This is super cool. They pay you $7,500 to go on PTO, on vacation. So here you go, $7,500. Enjoy. It's not punitive. Suddenly I'm supporting you. Like, go show me pictures, have fun, because you're not allowed to log in. That's part of the rules. You can't log in. If you do, I interviewed their CEO. I was like, do they have to give the money back? He was a little like, well, so I'm not sure you have to give the money back. But what happens is when I'm going on PTO, you'll support me. 99% retention rate. They've never advertised this before, and they are far their cost for this, their investment, is much lower than the money they're getting in return. So there are things that can be done, but I recognize not everyone's a CEO. I understand that, and frankly, that kind of bothered me about leadership books. They're just written for the top 1%. I wrote this also for the bottom 99%. In fact, I have a whole thing on the 21-year-old employee coming right out of college. What kind of influence, I talk about that, can they have to change a culture? There are examples at Starbucks and other places where young, new employees radically shifted a culture from the ground up. So that was a big part of it as well, because I said, this can't just be for top CEOs or executives. It needs to be for everybody. I've used cases in there, and I'll end with this. I write about a bookstore owner who has $0. It's like 10 employees, $0. What on earth do? I can't create this sophisticated algorithm, but there are things that he or she can do, and I outline this as well. So this is meant for everybody, but it's got jumping off points. It's very research driven, the first half, but very practical. I'd say that's another, being in psychology and business for so long has helped me understand there's really important in the validity in the work that we do. There's very important in the usefulness of what business does. And I think the future of psychology is threading that needle of usefulness and validity. I know I was on the validity side at work for a while, and I got blank stares from CEOs. Like, I don't care. This has to be useful for us. So that's an important thing to consider.